Hey everybody, it is Tuesday, August 26th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Mununu.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. And Jill continues to be on countdown to fall. Jill, how are we doing?
So I know some people say the unofficial start of fall is right after Labor Day, or Labor Day is the unofficial last weekend of summer. But today could technically be a runner-up to the first unofficial day of fall, and that is because pumpkin spice lattes are back at Starbucks.
All right, that's a key demarcation line there.
Yes.
Officially, though, we are 27 days out from fall. It begins on September 22nd this year. So, Jill, less than a month away. PSLs are on sale. We have, for the most part in the country, cooler than normal conditions. So, well, I can't speak to those of you in the Pacific Northwest or in Texas right now, but across the Midwest and the East Coast, starting to feel a little bit like fall.
And Moshe, I am loving it.
Jill, if you're happy, we're happy.
Okay, now to the headlines. President Trump wants to send the National Guard to Chicago. Chicago doesn't want them. The war of words between Trump and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker.
Yeah, we'll give you the latest in the back and forth, what Trump said in the Oval Office, and J.B. Pritzker standing outside Trump Tower in Chicago on Monday.
The president also taking aim at cashless bail in Washington, D.C. and across the country. Plus the latest in the saga of Salvadoran migrant Kilmar Abrego Garcia. The U.S. government now trying to deport him to Uganda. What a judge is saying.
Yeah, we will retrace the past 6 months as we've been following this case around the world.
And yet another headline from the White House. President Trump calling for flag burning to be banned, even though there is a Supreme Court precedent that flag burning is considered protected free speech. In medical news, the first pig-to-human lung transplant announced by Chinese scientists. What we know about it. In business, Keurig Dr. Pepper is buying Peet in an $18 billion deal, but they're looking to spin off their coffee business.
It's a tough time to be in the coffee business, even during pumpkin spice latte season.
To geography, which, Moshe, I don't think we've ever said before here on the podcast.
No, but I'm super excited.
I know you are. This story is everything you're about. African countries urging the world to redraw the map, as they say, to show the greatness of Africa.
Well, not just that, Jill, to actually accurately reflect the size of Africa. We're about to blow your mind about the map that, well, we've all been looking at our entire lives, the 500-plus-year-old map, and how big countries should actually be and where they're actually located on the map. Get ready.
And the very surprising winner at the weekend box office, Netflix's Kpop Demon Hunters.
Dominating the small screen and the big screen. You can't get away from Netflix.
And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, going with today's theme, on this day in history, summer days drifting away, the summer nights.
Oh, well. I think I know.
On this day in history.
All right, starting with the latest on the showdown between President Trump and Chicago. The president has been threatening to send federal troops to the city to combat crime. It's similar to what he did with the National Guard deployments in Washington, D.C. and also Los Angeles. On Monday, Trump ramping up his rhetoric, calling Chicago a, quote, disaster and a, quote, killing field. He warned that if local leaders do not request help, he says, we may just go in and do it, citing crime in the city, but still not saying that he made a final decision. Then later Monday, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker spoke to the media. He called the president's potential plan an overreach and a manufactured crisis. He said no one from the White House or the executive branch has reached out to him or to the mayor of Chicago. They haven't tried to figure out anything that could be helpful to Chicago. Instead, he says that he and other Illinois officials found out what the president was planning the same way that many of us did, by reading about it in the paper.
We found out what Donald Trump was planning the same way that all of you did. We read a story in the Washington Post. It's about the President of the United States and his complicit lackey, Stephen Miller, searching for ways to lay the groundwork to circumvent our democracy, militarize our cities, and end elections. There is no emergency in Chicago that calls for armed military intervention. There is no insurrection. There is no insurrection.
Pritzker pointing to what, in theory, could be a legal justification for sending in troops. He said that if this was happening in any other country, we would call it what it is, a, quote, dangerous power grab. So Trump was asked about that Monday, about this criticism that he has been acting like an authoritarian dictator from California, where he sent the National Guard in to tamp down on ICE protests, and then to Washington, D.C., where the federal government is now in control of the D.C. police. And next, potentially Chicago. Here's President Trump.
A lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator. I don't like a dictator. I'm not a dictator. I'm a man with great common sense, and I'm a smart person. And when I see what's happening to our cities, and then you send in troops, instead of being praised, they're saying you're trying to take over the republic. These people are sick.
Pritzker promising to take Trump to court if he deploys troops to Chicago, saying that there is no law that allows him to put National Guard troops on the streets of the city. Moshe, I was watching the local CBS station in Chicago.
WBBM.
That's right. I used to do my Money Watch hits for WBBM every morning.
Grew up watching them, Jill.
The anchor asking a political analyst in the city if this was legal. So the analyst said, can Trump do this legally? Probably not. Will he do it? Probably. And will also probably end up with a federal judge in Chicago ruling on it.
Yeah, a reminder here that what Trump did in California, where he overrode the governor, Gavin Newsom, there to deploy the National Guard in L.A., is currently being adjudicated. A lower court ruled with the state over President Trump. That's being held up right now. So that's going through the appeals process. In very rare instances, Jill, do they allow the president to override a governor of a state. Under the law, a state's governor controls the state's National Guard. Now, the president can federalize and deploy troops over a governor's objection if there is a, quote, threatened rebellion or invasion, which Pritzker says isn't happening. It's hard to argue that even with crime at current levels, which, by the way, is slightly down from previous years, that you could call that a rebellion or an invasion. But we have seen in history certain instances where legally this has held up. But most of those were desegregation examples, Jill, in the 50s and 60s. You might recall the images of President Eisenhower federalizing the Arkansas National Guard to enforce school desegregation over the governor's objections. JFK had to do it a couple times in Mississippi. And then over the demands of Governor George Wallace in Alabama, he federalized the Alabama National Guard to ensure Black students could enroll in school back then. But in very rare instances have we seen this in American history. But Trump here are very much trying to expand the precedent. And of course, there's politics at play here, which I'll get to in a second. Now, again, in Illinois, in Chicago, officials note that crime in the city is down in 2025 compared to previous years, even as the city still leads the nation overall in homicides. That's an unfortunate record Chicago has now had for about 13 years straight, the most amount of homicides in the country, just under 600 last year. Though if you look at a per capita murder rate based on the population size, Chicago actually finishes 8th in murders, behind cities number 1, St. Louis, number 2, New Orleans, number 3, Detroit, 4, D.C., 5, Atlanta, 6, Indianapolis, and 7, Richmond. Then you get Chicago there at number 8. Notably, Jill, a majority of those cities actually are cities in red states: St. Louis, New Orleans, Atlanta, Indy, Richmond. And so the argument you hear from Democrats is, hey, Trump, if you're really worried about the murder rate, why aren't you focusing on number 1, St. Louis, or number 2, New Orleans, as opposed to jumping down there to Chicago? Are you only focusing on these states because they happen to have blue governors and we're going into midterm elections next year? And politically, this is a move Trump is making, right, to embarrass Democrats, to show that Democrats can't govern effectively, especially as they make the argument next year that Republicans need to hold the House, need to hold the Senate. And so, you know, that's a bit of what you're seeing here. And Democrats, again, arguing, hey, Republicans, you guys are so into federalism, states' rights, giving states authority, but now you're sending in the National Guard to, in some cases, you're citing the taking of illegal weapons off the streets. What would you have said in a reverse example if President Biden or President Obama deployed the National Guard in red states and was citing on a daily basis how many guns were being taken off the streets? What would be the reaction from Republicans there? So that is a bit of what you're hearing from Democrats. At the same time, Jill, as we told you on the podcast yesterday, we've heard from a number of members of the Mo News community. Chicago is one of our biggest followings on Instagram. Very proudly, I say, by the way, as somebody who was born and raised in the Chicago area. And we are hearing from a number of people in Chicago who say they do feel less safe in recent years as crime has moved into areas heavily trafficked by tourists, more high-income areas, the northern areas like River North and the West Loop, and the north side of the city. That's not just isolated to the south side of the city where you have historically seen a lot of gang violence. No mistake, Joe, years ago, there have been documentaries. Chicago's been referred to as Chirac because of the level of violence and guns in the city. For years, some people are saying, even Trump critics say, we might be able to use the help here. At the same time, you have people chiming in from Chicago who are saying, actually, I feel safe in the city. And even given crimes that are happening out there, I don't think the National Guard is the right fix here. Even if a temporary show of force helps, what is the long-term solution? What core issues are being gotten at here? Does the president genuinely care about crime, or is he trying to make a political statement here? So that's a bit of what we're seeing. Jill, it was interesting hearing Trump yesterday. He was hedging a bit in the Oval Office. He got a follow-up question. So are you going to do this? And he's like, well, they technically have to invite me in. I don't have to override the governor. I'm not sure if I'm doing this. So a lot of hedging here from Trump. Not saying he's not going to do it. Not saying he's definitely going to do it. But it's certainly a story we're going to be watching in the coming days here.
Sticking with President Trump's efforts to highlight crime at the federal level, on Monday, he signed an executive order aimed at ending cashless bail in Washington, D.C., and possibly across the United States. The cashless bail policy lets some defendants be released from custody before trial without paying any money up front. People charged with murder, generally not eligible for this. Supporters say that it prevents discrimination against low-income defendants, many facing nonviolent charges. Supporters say some are then stuck in jail. They could lose their jobs and then are forced to commit even more crimes. So they say cashless bail is a net positive. Advocates also say that it prevents overcrowding in jails, but there are plenty of critics like President Trump who argue that cashless bail means that dangerous criminals are going back on the streets and that this creates a situation leading to repeat offenders who believe that there are no ramifications for their crimes.
Yeah, and the argument as that goes is that while cashless bail is only related to nonviolent crimes, we're talking about theft, simple assault with no major injuries, drug distribution, that allowing people to continue to be released for those types of crimes ends up leading to violent crime.
And some law enforcement officials will also say that part of the problem is what somebody is charged with is not necessarily the crime they committed. Sometimes it is a lesser charge, so it doesn't necessarily represent what actually happened.
Yeah, and, there's been critics of this, prominent law enforcement officials. Bill Bratton, who was police commissioner both in L.A. and New York, he had a strategy called broken windows policing. The theory there, and you did see evidence of crime decreasing, is that visible signs of minor crime, graffiti, even litter, lead to an environment that encourages more serious criminal activity by aggressively addressing those quality of life offenses. He is under the impression, and there's a number of law enforcement officials who back this up, that say that that then restores a sense of order and safety to communities. So that is, kind of behind this argument over cashless bail. So Trump is making this major argument. A lot of blue states like Illinois, New Mexico, New Jersey have eliminated or nearly eliminated cash bail. New York has scaled back, though, cash bail reform initiatives after recent crime spikes. Now, data shows that about 5% of people released on bail and awaiting trial in New York are rearrested each month, the majority for additional misdemeanors, but 5% is not insignificant if we're talking about thousands of crimes here. And again, we're talking about disorderly conduct, but things that lead people to feel less safe. Jill, there was a notable story in the Wall Street Journal yesterday that talked about the NYPD strategy here, that they're trying to create a perception that things are safer. Even if crime is down, people aren't feeling it due to the observation of these misdemeanors and, issues related to drug distribution, homeless encampments, etc. So this is a core issue that in a number of cities across America you have probably seen debated near you. Trump's order, though, will face legal challenges because at the end of the day, he can't just order the end of cashless bail. These are state and local laws across the country. He is going to try to cut funds to cities that have cashless bail. They will, if they haven't already by the time of this podcast, file lawsuits in federal court. And notably, last week, a federal judge did block the administration from withholding funds for cities that don't cooperate with immigration enforcement. So this is a tactic Trump has tried in the past, saying, hey, how do I get places to do what I want? I will withhold federal funding from them. They then sue. So he's trying to do that on the immigration front. He's not trying to do that on the cashless bail front. And so another story we will be watching. Jill, just because it's nonstop from the White House as we record this podcast late on Monday night. This is a story we will cover more in depth tomorrow. And on the Instagram page, Trump, breaking news late Monday night, he's removing the Federal Reserve Governor, Lisa Cook. She has been on the Federal Reserve Board, notably the first Black woman to ever serve on the Federal Reserve Board under Jerome Powell there. He cites a criminal referral for her and saying under his constitutional authority, he can remove her forcibly from the Federal Reserve. That criminal referral coming from the Federal Housing Finance Agency. He's accusing her of mortgage fraud. And so just based on the accusation, Trump says he's removing her. That, well, that's yet another case. We'll be watching that. It'll go to court here, but a notable headline because it's nonstop from Washington these days.
Time for the speed read from Axios. The long, drawn-out saga of Salvadoran migrant Kilmar Abrego Garcia continued on Monday. He is now being held in a Virginia jail after he was arrested by immigration agents on Monday. The Trump administration has announced plans to immediately deport him to Uganda, to which a federal judge questioned whether Abrego Garcia, who is a Maryland resident, has been afforded sufficient due process. Some background, as we've now been tracking this for nearly 6 months. So in March, Abrego Garcia was mistakenly deported to El Salvador, according to the U.S. government. While he has no legal status in the United States and was eligible for deportation, a judge had explicitly said that he couldn't be sent to his home country where he feared violence. That said, the U.S. government initially refused to bring him back. He was held in a prison there where he said he experienced torture. He was then returned to the U.S. in June, but he was kept in custody and then charged with smuggling undocumented immigrants related to a case from several years ago. The Trump administration has accused him of being an MS-13 gang member, which is something that he has also denied.
So a lot of accusations here. He has actually been in the U.S. for about 14 years now. Jill, he came as an 11-year-old, came in with undocumented status. He eventually worked in construction. He's had several arrests through the years. He's been accused several times from his current wife of domestic violence. He is married to an American, has a couple kids here. But as you mentioned, he has been eligible for deportation for a while, just not to El Salvador. But that is where he was sent. And then you heard from the White House, we did it, but we don't care. He's staying there. And then they eventually brought him back. So sorry, but not sorry. And then they found charges against him, right? These charges relate to human smuggling. But it doesn't appear they're pursuing these charges. They're just going to deport him again to another place. The only place in the world they could not deport him to was his home country of El Salvador. But they actually made him an offer recently, Jill. We'll send you to Costa Rica if you plead guilty. He said no. So now they've come back and said, you know what? We're going to just send you to Uganda now. Uganda, one of a few of African countries that have struck deals with the U.S., in some cases for certain benefits, in some cases for just money to take in U.S. deportees that can't be sent back to their home countries. We have an issue with Venezuela, with some other countries who won't take back their deportees. So this administration, given their very aggressive immigration stance, is trying to find other places to send people who have undocumented status here in the U.S. So there's South Sudan, there's a small country called Eswatini, and in this case, there's also Uganda, which apparently has agreed to take on Kilmar Abrego Garcia. But a judge yesterday said, hold up, not so fast. We need to look into this. There are questions about his constitutional rights and whether he is being afforded them. A reminder, the Constitution doesn't refer to citizens. It refers to persons or people in the U.S. And this has been key to our federal law going back 250 years. A reminder, for those who ask about this, the Constitution says that even people here, regardless of status, even here illegally, have certain rights, people or persons within the U.S. So a judge, federal judge here, looking into the matter, it looks like the new deportation to Uganda is delayed at least until Wednesday. Attorneys for Abrego Garcia saying they need to figure out whether he's going to have full rights in Uganda. A reminder, the prisons in Uganda, they're known for violence, torture, other matters, and that's a bit of what you probably will expect to hear from Abrego Garcia, Jill, as this saga continues.
Staying in D.C. from the Mo News Instagram account, President Trump on Monday signing an executive order directing federal prosecutors to pursue criminal charges against people who burn American flags during protests. The move seeks to get around a 1989 Supreme Court ruling which struck down flag burning bans in 48 states and held that burning the flag is protected political expression under the First Amendment. Trump instructing Attorney General Pam Bondi to see if demonstrators can be charged under other laws like disturbing the peace or environmental violations. He argued, quote, "You burn a flag, you get 1 year in jail." Although the order itself does not include a jail sentence, the Supreme Court decision back in 1989 was a 5-4 ruling, and legal experts say that Trump's order is likely to face immediate constitutional challenges.
Yeah, Trump asking the Attorney General here to find a case that could challenge that ruling. The majority of the justices on the Supreme Court now, it is a 6-3 conservative majority, much more than existed more than 30 years ago, the last time they saw this case. A reminder, Trump tries to do a lot of stuff through executive order. This requires a law. In fact, this requires, based on where we are right now, a constitutional amendment. So this is something that will also go to the courts here, and it'll be interesting to see whether the Supreme Court takes this up, because they have had a pretty open stance in regards to First Amendment and free speech recently. Would be interesting to see how they would rule on this today. That was a very close ruling. You actually had a conservative, Scalia, join the liberals in that ruling back in 89. As far as how Americans feel today, it has been interesting to look at polling, Jill, through the years. Remember, burning the American flag was very big in the Vietnam era as people were protesting the war, and was actually particularly popular. Over the last few decades, though, more and more Americans now consider burning a U.S. flag unacceptable. A recent survey from YouGov a couple years ago found that about 6 in 10 Americans believe that's unacceptable. About a half of Americans believe that flag burning should be illegal. About a third believe it should remain legal. That's as of, again, a couple of years ago. So I imagine some new polls will be out there. For those of you asking, when it comes to democracies, where do we fall? Well, we fall with right now the UK, Canada, and Australia, I think Norway and Sweden as well, as countries where flag burning is legal. But there are a number of democracies out there where flag burning is illegal, punishable by prison time. Those countries include where flag burning is banned: Germany, France, Greece, Spain, Italy, Mexico, Korea, and Israel, among a few others.
Now to a potentially big medical breakthrough from National Geographic. For the first time ever documented, a pig lung was transplanted into a human. This was announced by scientists in China in a study that was published this week in Nature Medicine. The transfer actually took place in May of last year, and it was short-lived. The patient was brain dead, and the immune response was only monitored for 9 days. Scientists telling Nat Geo that they stopped the experiment once, quote, "our main scientific goals were achieved." They assessed the patient for uncontrolled infection and organ rejection. Also, the family had requested that they stop the experiment. The study, though, marks another critical milestone for xenotransplantation, or the practice of exchanging organs between species, and it comes on the heels of recent transplants of pig kidneys and hearts into human patients. The study's authors say that the 39-year-old patient didn't immediately and intensely reject the lung. It was from a gene-edited pig. Although the person did exhibit an immune response and some organ damage, scientists say that substantial challenges remain before this type of lung xenotransplantation can be safely performed in a medical setting, including how to best manage that immune response.
Yeah, that's always the big issue here with transplants from other species, is they recognize it, the human body recognizes things like pig tissue as foreign and typically attacks it. Now, as for why they're using pigs here, pig hearts, pig kidneys, other organs are roughly the same size as human organs. They function in a comparable way. And so that is why they've been hopeful here about using some types of pig organs in humans, and they're hoping to get a breakthrough here. One surgeon over at Northwestern says if we establish safety and efficacy, this could be a paradigm shift long term. That surgeon says that receiving an organ from a human donor is like buying a used car, noting you don't know what you're getting because donor health and the condition of the organ can vary widely. But if we can figure out xenotransplantation and getting the human body not to reject animal organs, well, there's a steady stream out there of healthy animal organs that, at least hypothetically, could standardize the quality of transplants. Demand is growing. There are long lists, depending on what organ you're looking for, and there's only a limited number of healthy and compatible human lungs out there. So a positive study here, Jill, but there's still a fair amount that needs to be figured out before lungs can be transplanted from pigs into patients on a wide-scale level.
Some business news from the New York Times. Keurig Dr. Pepper said Monday that it would acquire the European coffee company JDE Peet for roughly $18 billion. It is the latest mega deal by food companies trying to stay ahead of changes in consumer demand. Keurig Dr. Pepper plans to combine its coffee business, which includes its namesake single-serve coffee pods, with JDE Peet's, which includes Peet's Coffee, and then spin it into a new company. So a coffee company, and then the remaining beverage businesses would include brands like Dr. Pepper, Snapple, and 7-Up. This would effectively undo the multi-billion-dollar combination of Keurig and Dr. Pepper that was announced back in 2018. The deal meant to create a beverage giant with the capacity to distribute hot and cold drinks to customers while saving money. But in the past several years, the coffee industry has slowed down significantly as coffee bean prices have surged, which has softened demand and also increased competition from cheaper store brands. The head of Keurig Dr. Pepper warned during a call with analysts last month that it expects the company's coffee business will remain subdued because of the effects of inflation, tariffs, and consumer uncertainty. There have been droughts in Brazil and Vietnam, which are two of the biggest coffee exporters in the world, and they've resulted in smaller harvests, and that has helped to drive up prices. And then on top of that, this month, President Trump imposed a 50% tariff on coffee imported from Brazil. So, Moshe, tough times to be in the coffee biz.
Yeah, definitely. Jill, it reminds me what we're seeing here is a bit what we're seeing in the media business when it comes to cable channels. So in the beverage business, you want to spin off coffee because it's a slow growth situation. In the media business, companies like Comcast are spinning off most of their cable channels because cord cutting and fewer and fewer people watching cable. So recently they spun off, we told the story of like MSNBC is now MS Now, along with CNBC, USA, a bunch of those networks. They've spun those off. You know, in any business, you want to focus on what's growing and you want to cut out what's not growing. You know, it's interesting, Jill, because we've done analyses of our audience. We learn a lot from Instagram and from the newsletter. And we actually, you, the Mo News consumer, you tend to consume 3 to 5 times more coffee than the average consumer, which is one of the reasons that we bring you so many coffee stories here on Mo News. At least that's what the data shows. That's how much we can learn about you.
A community after my own heart, Moshe. I think I consume probably 3 times the amount of coffee that most Americans do.
Well, maybe we just need to take you out of the data and we got to see if like the rest of the audience actually reflects that or whether you are moving up the average there. Nonetheless, coffee prices, the average price of a ground roast coffee up 33% over the last year. Now, that said, the new coffee company here is going to have about $16 billion in annual sales. So coffee's not dying out, but certainly it is dealing with challenging times here. Jill, we've been tracking a lot of interesting deals and mergers in recent years. Back in 2023, Kellogg spun out snacks like Pringles and Cheez-It crackers into a company, Kellanova. It shifted its underperforming cereal business, brands like Fruit Loops, Rice Krispies, into WK Kellogg. So we've seen separation there. And then recently, Mars decided to buy Kellanova in a huge candy acquisition, a $36 billion deal there. Kraft Heinz, for its part, has also been weighing its own deal to break up a merger announced 10 years ago. So they get together, they separate, they get together again. It's the food equivalent of a soap opera.
From the Mo News Substack, Africa would like to have a word with the rest of us, that is. For decades, maps have been selling Africa short. literally. The current map, which is called the Mercator projection, was created in the 1500s for European sailors, and it was designed to make navigation easier at sea, not to necessarily show land size accurately. The trade-off is that regions near the equator, like Africa, were shrunk down, while areas closer to the poles, like Europe and Greenland, were blown way out of proportion. This distortion has stuck with us for centuries. On most maps, Africa looks similar in size to Europe or Greenland, but in reality, it is exponentially bigger.
Yeah, so pull up a map right now, and you will see that Africa and Greenland look like they're about the same size. They are not. Africa, in reality, is 14 times bigger than Greenland. You could actually fit inside Africa, in reality, the US, China, India, and much of Western Europe, all inside Africa, and you would still have room to spare. The argument here is that this is not just a cartography quirk, that the size of things matters in modern society, and it has shaped how generations have perceived Africa's importance, that ultimately we made Europe look bigger, North America look bigger, but in reality, they're actually much smaller. If you look at the accurate reflected map, we put it in the Substack over at the Mo News Substack, you see that Africa's humongous and should be the center of the map. And so that's why they have this new campaign called Correct the Map. It is urging schools, media, governments to adopt what's called the Equal Earth projection. The African Union, that's the diplomatic organization that represents the 55 member countries in Africa, they endorsed the campaign this past month. This is a pretty big deal that they're getting behind this politically. And after centuries now of being downsized, Africa is hoping for a reality check that the Mercator map from our friend, the Flemish cartographer Gerard Mercator of the 1500s. Yes, we are using a map from 500 plus years ago, is corrected here. Jill, as a West Wing nerd, West Wing fan, there was an episode about this back in the 90s. So excuse me as I play a quick clip here. I imagine there are some West Wing fans who might remember this episode in the audience. Here is a bit of an episode where they have these people advocating for this 30 years ago. Well, it's a TV show, coming to the White House. You'll hear CJ Craig here, that's actress Allison Janney, questioning these experts and just being shocked by what they're presenting.
Why are we changing maps?
Because, CJ, the Mercator projection has fostered European imperialist attitudes for centuries and created an ethnic bias against the Third World.
Really?
The German cartographer, Mercator, originally designed this map in 1569 as a navigational tool for European sailors.
The map enlarges areas at the poles to create straight lines of constant bearing or geographic direction.
So it makes it easier to cross an ocean.
But
Yes.
it distorts the relative size of nations and continents.
Are you saying the map is wrong?
Oh dear, yes. Look at Greenland.
Okay.
Now look at Africa.
Okay.
The two land masses appear to be roughly the same size.
Yes.
Would it blow your mind if I told you that Africa is in reality 14 times larger?
Yes?
So, Moshe, it is fascinating. And I just want to say, as an aside, I don't think there's ever been a story that checked as many boxes for you personally. History, geography, West Wing. So you're throwing in a little pop culture there.
Yeah.
I mean, this is everything you're about.
This is Christmas morning for me, Jill. I will say some of you might know this if you've listened to any of the podcast interviews where they've talked to me about like my history and Mo News, but my favorite book starting at 4 years old was The World Atlas. My parents don't know how this happened. I was introduced to it at my grandmother's house. I became obsessed with the World Atlas. I memorized world capitals and flags at age 5. And so this goes way back, Jill. This is like a 4-decade obsession.
Well, I am happy that we were able to include this story in the podcast, in the newsletter. I think it's on Instagram. I mean, we're going big with it.
We're going big. I hope I'm not boring all of you. But anyway, the Equal Earth projection versus the Mercator projection. Check it out, especially if you nerd out on these types of things like I do.
And finally, from Variety, in a box office twist, a film from Netflix appears to be #1 on the North American charts. Kpop Demon Hunters is estimated to have earned $18 million to $20 million in theaters on Saturday and Sunday. This movie is a sing-along version of the hit animated musical There are projections that put ticket sales for Kpop Demon Hunters ahead of the film Weapons, which is that horror movie with Josh Brolin and Julia Garner that was expected to claim first place. Kpop Demon Hunters is a fantasy adventure about a K-pop girl group protecting the world from demons with their music, playing on 1,700 screens with about 1,000 sold out showings.
So obviously it's unusual here because Netflix doesn't prioritize the theater. It's also unusual because Kpop Demon Hunters isn't new. It debuted on Netflix about 2 months ago, but it appears people are headed out to watch this. So it has been a pretty slow couple weeks here for the theaters. So Netflix is hoping the excitement will drive fans from the theater back to the Netflix platform as they head into the fall here. And it appears it's being played everywhere except for AMC at the moment. All right, now time for On This Day in History. We begin on this day in 1883. The volcano Krakatoa, this is one of the more famous eruptions in history, begins to erupt. Ultimately, 36,000 people were killed by this Krakatoa eruption. There was a resulting tsunami as well, one of the deadliest eruptions in human history. It blew off most of the top of the volcano there. It was so significant, Jill. Krakatoa actually made global temperatures cooler. It darkened the sky worldwide for several years, would produce these spectacular sunsets around the world, red skies, record rain. Fascinating how much of an impact one volcano can have. On this day in 1939, the first live sports game was broadcast on television. It was a Major League Baseball game on a local New York station that would eventually become WNBC. It was the Cincinnati Reds versus the Brooklyn Dodgers. At the time, television was still in its infancy. Regular program didn't really exist. Very few people actually owned TV sets. Only about 400 people could afford TVs at that time in the New York area on this day in 1939. By the mid-40s, regular broadcast TV did catch on. In the 50s, TV sets actually became affordable for the average American. Speaking of TV, on this day in 2001, the last episode of Mr. Rogers aired. And we end with music history. Those of you who didn't know what we were singing at the top of the broadcast, on this day in 1978, Frankie Valli's Grease reached the #1 spot on the Billboard charts. Now, that Grease album has a number of hits. You're the One That I Want, Hopelessly Devoted to You, and Summer Nights. Jill. So many hits, top 10 singles from that album.
Oh, well, oh, well, oh, well, tell me more, tell me more.
Like, did he have a car?
All right, we are not going to tell you guys anymore. It is a long podcast already. We do want to mention we're trying something new here on the Mo News podcast, as we always do. Every once in a while, Moshe and I have relatively funny, or we think that they're funny, outtakes. So we'll be playing those bloopers after you hear Olivia or Alex thanking you for listening to the Mo News podcast.
All right, so stay tuned here. Sort of like Veep used to do at the end of the HBO episodes. Once in a while, we will play a blooper. So you get a little benefit there for staying until the end of the podcast. See you guys back here tomorrow.
And you listen to Mo News podcast.
We are never, ever, ever getting back together. Who is that?
I mean, that's Taylor Swift.
But, okay.
But I don't know. I feel like if you're going to do that, you got to give it. You got to bring it back into the story.
Okay, I'll give you a better one.
Add a coda. I think it's the Beatles song "Hello Goodbye."
Or, you say hello,
up or down.
Say goodbye,
like Katy Perry. Yeah.
I don't have to sing anything. I could just leave it.
I'm just giving you suggested songs. we scrutinize.
If we're pushing it, like it's like too much. If I'm on like the struggle bus to figure out a song that goes with the breakup, it's fine.